Kids, today we're going to talk about invisible illnesses. I've been promising this conversation for a while now, and we're going to have it today. You might be startled to see my old look back. So let me explain. A couple of months ago, when I was going through the worst of my over-medicated state, when they really seriously over-medicated me, to the point that I was like a toxic waste dump and totally out of my mind, completely. I mean, I'm Looney Tunes, but it was beyond the pale. I felt like 5 seconds from death, and just prayed it would happen. I had some strange reactions, and I wanted to share this concept with you. And it still happens today. A lot of us are preconditioned to accept things that we can see. For example, I have psoriasis. You can see it. It's ugly, and there's no question that I have it because it's quite prevalent. And so if I tell you, oh, I have psoriasis, and you're looking at it, you know I have psoriasis, and it's not fake. You can't fake it. If I have an enormous, skin lesion or tumor on my body somewhere, and I can show it to you, then you know that I have it, and there's no question. Now, some diseases, like cancer, because it's so prevalent in our society and there's so many types, many of them you can't see, and people live with them for years, and you really don't know. But we give that a pass. If somebody says they have cancer, usually you don't think, oh, they're faking. Generally you believe they have cancer. Now, usually in the end stages of cancer, people become very gaunt and very, thin, and it looks like they're dying. And the same with HIV. Back in the days when people first started getting HIV, they got sick. It was a dreadful disease, but they got sick relatively quickly. They looked ill, and they died relatively quickly. And it was an agonizing disease, but it was mercifully quick at killing, very efficient. Since the cocktail days, we have a disease now with HIV where you can't tell if people are sick or not, and you can't tell if they're suffering or not. So you don't know. And but since it was so gory in the beginning, and since the beginning is still so fresh in everyone's mind, if somebody tells you they have HIV, chances are you don't question it. But then you do question things like if somebody says I have fibromyalgia, or I have morbid depression, or I have anxiety, or I have bipolar disorder, or I have schizophrenia, or all these things that you can't see. And they can be just as awful. Another one is a good example is temporal lobe epilepsy, which is an epilepsy that doesn't cause you to fall on the ground and start quivering and trying to bite your tongue and all that stuff. It just happens in the brain, and it actually looks like or hides itself looking like a lot of different mental illnesses all at once. So those are what I call the invisible diseases. Diabetes can also be a very invisible disease, unless you happen to get a diabetic naked, check their feet out real carefully, or they're in the very advanced stages where obviously limbs are coming off and eyesight's failing and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's a silent, unseen killer. High blood pressure is another one. Stress, another one. There are so many. Now, what I found interesting is a lot of people will, if they don't understand the disease, or they've known you without, and they think they've known you without it, generally they want you to snap out of it, like a depression, or you can snap out of it, or you can pray it away, or you can meditate it meditate your bipolar disorder into control and doing all those things. Now, I've long been an advocate for not using medication whenever possible. And my trip down hell started in October when I actually submitted to trying to use a medication, something that I had avoided successfully for I don't know, almost 30 years, 20 something years, and like 28 years. And I can tell you that medications do help in some ways. For example, my high blood pressure medication keeps my blood pressure under control, and my diabetes medication keeps my blood sugar under control. You know, and I'm responsible as far as like not eating crap and, you know, salty foods and sugary shit and junk. Although I'm guilty of occasionally sneaking a fast food taco every once in a while, just for the good old days. But I do like extra dog poop picking up or something to make up for it. But what struck me the most was these people, especially the ones closest to you, strangers will just walk away. You'll scare them and they just walk away, and that's perfectly fine, because that means they're not really important in your life. But those people that are really close to you, some will have a big problem with it. And what was funny was I've had a couple people that I've been very, very close to that also have invisible diseases that just could not accept the fact that I was sick, because they couldn't see it. And they didn't want to remember me, that they didn't want to see me that way. And they gave all kinds of advice and different things. But you have to remember something. I went into a doctor, and prior to that, a lot of my practice was teaching people coping mechanisms of how to live without medication. And I did myself for many, many years very successfully. And I've taught a lot of people very valuable things to help them cope with stress and anxiety and depression and all that stuff. But when your body starts to react in a way that takes control, chemically takes control, and starts changing you chemically, occasionally the only opportunity or option you have is to try to do a medical or a medicine intervention to break a cycle. But once you start doing that, then you run the risk of imbalancing yourself chemically. And I had, in my case, no coping mechanism for fixing that, because I had never been unbalanced chemically, because I refused to take medication, so I'd always had natural options. But at some point they began to fail in my body, chemistry started to change. And then with the medication, it became completely unbalanced and completely shattered. And I had no coping mechanism. And I'm still to this day learning to cope with the new reality of my new body chemistry, which is much different than it used to be. And once I figure out how to do that, then I can, of course, share that. But don't disregard people when they tell you, hey, you know, I really do have depression. I mean, there are days that I can recall that I couldn't get out of bed. I was so exhausted and so depressed that the idea of leaving my bed, I just couldn't do it. I mean, I would literally be there for 17 hours, and I would only get up once, maybe because I had to urinate. And I one time honestly contemplating just peeing in my bed and rolling over. That's just how depressed. And you can't see that when I'm talking to you, you know, on YouTube. It's something you can't see. I'm not going to videotape that. So I tried to show recently what it felt like to be, how ugly it felt like to be inside me. So as you noticed over the course of the last several months, I started growing my hair uncontrollably. I let my beard grow uncontrollably. And I looked as crazy and as far out and as odd as I felt. And then people started writing me and saying, "Oh my God, what's wrong with you?" And I said, well, if you haven't been, if you've been underwater for the last, 7 months, I've had this issue that came up, and it's rather serious, and I'm trying to cope with it. And it took 3 months, 2 or 3 months of growing my beard out and growing my hair out to this really ugly phase, for some people to realize, yeah, there's really something wrong with him. And I found it amazing that it was only after the beard appeared that people took me seriously, because as one psychologist pointed out to me, I tend to be very vivid in my speech, and most people that they see do not communicate as well as I do. But I don't know how to communicate any other way than the way I know how to speak. So he actually said, your eloquence probably is holding them at bay because they don't know what to make out of it, which I felt was strange. And I can remember people talking to me when fibromyalgia first became well known, about how people wouldn't believe them, and the pain that they go through because they couldn't see it. And it was hard, and they couldn't see it through a microscope or whatever, and it was hard to believe. And they just thought people were, either depressed or lazy or whatever it was. So if you have one of these diseases, or probably there's several hundred I haven't mentioned, hang tough. It's going to be a tough battle with your friends and your family and everyone you come in contact with, until we all decide to change our minds. I wouldn't wish one of these diseases on anyone, but sometimes that's what it takes to really understand. So that's what I wanted to say today, and I hope you enjoy my new look, or my old look, and realize that I'm not really feeling better. I just cleaned up a little bit. It's summer, it's Florida, and it's ungodly hot here. So I'll talk to you later.